Okay, so today we're going to be talking about everything wrong with Chelsea. Before I continue, I want it to be known that I actually have a lot of respect for Chelsea as a football club. Chelsea is one of the teams I think about when I'm nostalgic about when I first got into football. I remember those classic Champions League matches and all the build-up and anticipation before them. I also like the fact that, generally speaking, when one of their players leave, even the good ones they'd rather keep, the fans don't hold any grudges and try to make sure that the player is always welcome. And lastly, one thing I really envy about Chelsea is that even when everything looks dark and gloomy, they always seem to win a trophy or two. In 2012, after getting rid of AVB midway through the season, they won the Champions League and the FA Cup. Then the next season, with one of their most hated managers in recent seasons, they won the Europa League. Even this year, despite Sarri being under massive pressure and having practically no attack, they won the Europa League. Basically, what I'm saying is that Chelsea have a lot of redeemable qualities, but they also have some problems that just can't be ignored. With that out of the way, let's get to business. The first problem Chelsea have is the constant chopping and changing of managers pretty much every other season. Since Roman Abramovich took over in 2003, Chelsea have had 12 different managers at a rate of a new manager every 1.33 seasons. Basically, 3 different managers every 4 seasons. While this approach has yielded a lot of success, it also creates a lot of uncertainty at the club. Pretty much every season at the club has its own unique narrative and a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the manager. One of the problems with this is that it creates a practically never-ending cycle of players that don't fit the system anymore. Take for example Chelsea's last 2 managers before Frank Lampard took over. Let's start with Antonio Conte. In his first season at the club, he integrated Victor Moses into the team at right wing back and brought in Marcos Alonso to play on the other flank. While Conte was at the club, both of these players had a defined role in the team and were important players for the system. Fast forward to 2019 and Alonso can barely get a game at Chelsea, while Victor Moses is on loan at Fenerbahce. Now let's take the most recent manager, Maurizio Sarri. If you're unaware, the big thing about Sarri taking over was that he would build his team around Jorginho. While it's debatable whether the experiment was a success, you can argue that if Frank Lampard can't find a role for Jorginho that brings out the best of him, then Jorginho is practically dead weight until Lampard leaves the club and a compatible manager comes along. The other problem with changing managers every other season is that at some point you run out of managers to hire and fire. Since 2003, when Abramovich took over, Chelsea have been managed by Mourinho, Scolari, Ranieri, Ancelotti. I could go on. And these are all managers who have been highly sought after at some point in their career, and many of them have won the biggest trophies in world football. Since Chelsea have gone through so many managers, they are now forced to go after less prestigious managers who may not be proven yet but appear to be promising. Another side effect of this is that more long-term minded managers who may otherwise be a good fit for the club might be scared off by the lack of job security. The next problem is one you might already be familiar with, and it's the club's systematic lack of youth support. This is actually kind of an extension of the first problem because it arises from the fact that as a Chelsea manager starts the job, they're expected to bring success as soon as possible. This causes the manager to avoid any sort of long-term thinking and neglect players from the academy and young players in general. Of course, this is now a general issue in football, but Chelsea's approach to youth players is a little bit extreme. As of February 2019, Chelsea had 42 players on loan, with the vast majority of those players being under the age of 23. While that number may be lower since Chelsea's transfer ban came into effect, it gives you a good idea of how bad Chelsea are with youth players. A byproduct of Chelsea's policy towards younger players is that players at the club could struggle to have a real attachment since, on one hand, any young players in the team don't feel their place in the team is secure, so they might not be completely committed, and on the other hand, the foreign players on the team don't have those through and through Chelsea players to give them an idea of what playing for the club is about, so they might treat playing for the club like any other regular job that you have no real attachment to. Either way, Chelsea need to sort out this problem if they intend to continue being successful and sustainable in the future in the event that Abramovich sells the club. On that note, the third problem I see with Chelsea is quite controversial, and it's the club's lack of identity. Before you dislike the video, just allow me to get my point across. Chelsea are easily one of the biggest clubs in the world, and that can largely be attributed to how Roman Abramovich has treated the club like his own passion project for the last 15 or so years. This has made the club very successful in recent times, and actually the most successful in England since 2003 as far as major trophies go. But that success has come with the question of whether Chelsea is still Chelsea and if they'll be the same if or when Abramovich leaves. That's the thing with Chelsea. They have this sort of duality that can basically be summed up as Chelsea pre-Abramovich and post-Abramovich. Because of that and the success they've experienced, the fans you come across have very different views of their club, and it's typically easy to tell when they started supporting the club if their age doesn't give it away. This is also something I've seen with Man City fans, and while earning new fans is a good thing because it indicates good times, it dilutes the identity and the ethos of a club. The other aspect that I think contributes to Chelsea's lack of identity is the fact that they're one of the few clubs with no real fierce one-to-one rival. Like take for example Man United and Liverpool, Spurs and Arsenal, or even Newcastle and Sunderland. Chelsea do have rivalries with Spurs, Leeds, and to a much smaller extent QPR, but none of those are completely reciprocal as far as stature, animosity, that sort of thing. The lack of that sort of true rival of similar stature gives off the feeling that Chelsea is just missing something. And that's a big thing to miss. The ingrained hatred or rivalry with another club is one of those things that makes being a fan feel complete, and it's something that can keep the fans passionate and engaged even if the trophies have been hard to come by in recent years. So just to wrap this video up, this video is not intended to be offensive or unnecessarily critical, but it's just what I've observed as an outsider looking in.